Hi boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and gorilla fans all over the world. My name's Robbo and this is Gorilla TV. And tonight on Gorilla Talk, we have the absolute pleasure of sitting down and having a chat with John Breeden. John is the father of Darby Breeden, who plays in our senior quaffle team. John, welcome to Gorilla Talk, mate.
Glad to be here, long time listener.
Mate, wrapped to have you on the show. We've known each other for a while now. First of all, mate, can you tell us a bit about your family, where you grew up, because it's a bit different from some of the other people we have on the show who are a bit more local to the club.
So I grew up in a very rural area, mainly dairy and horse farms around in central Virginia in America, just outside of a city called Richmond, Virginia, which is about an hour and a half south of Washington, D.C., so on the East Coast. America. So.
What about siblings, mate? And
my sister's 6 years older, and I'm still very close to her. She comes over all the time, and then my brother's about 3 years older than me, and we're I guess we get along, but we've never had a whole lot in common. He was more of a introvert sort of computer guy, and more an outdoorsy kid. So.
Outdoorsy kid. What was a John a young John like, mate? Because I reckon you probably would have been a little bit of a rascal, mate.
Yeah, so growing up, we had 55 acres in the last place I lived. So I had a lot of freedom. So I had fished in the summer, hunted in the winter. I had a gun when I was 8.
A gun when you were 8?
Yeah.
Is that pretty stock standard in America?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it was a semi-automatic 22, so with a 50 clip on it. So.
I can just imagine Tate and Hadley watching this going, Dad, he had a semi-automatic? No, son, you're not getting that.
That's right. So that was pretty much, I was outdoors as much as I could be. I wasn't really an indoor kid. I didn't really play with computer games or anything like that. I just ran around.
So what were you hunting for at
8? Anything
that
moves, pretty much. Yeah, as an 8-year. Well, what do 8-year-old boys, I was a country boy, right?
Yeah.
So, squirrels, rabbits. I'd go deer hunting with my dad occasionally. But pretty much anything I could. We try to do bow hunting. That's actually a lot harder than people realize. It's
bear hunting?
Bow hunting.
Oh, bow hunting, okay. Mate, I wouldn't be going hunting for bears.
No, I don't went hunting for bears.
Bow hunting, can you give us a bit of a... pretend I'm a 2-year-old, which most people probably think I am sometimes.
Yeah.
Explain bow hunting for me.
So we had compound bows, which basically have wheels up at the top, and then they're like 3 strings, and you pull them back.
Oh, crossbow?
No, crossbows are...
A little bit similar.
Yeah, compound bow is more... It's vertical, whereas crossbow is horizontal. So
yeah. So more like Robin Hood.
Yeah, it helps you pull it back.
Yeah.
And so when you're pulled back, you can hold it for longer, and then you've got sights. Like there's like little dots for sights that you can line things up. But I wouldn't
want to mess with you when you were a little kid, mate.
Well, that was just country boys growing up.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just what you did. I mean, there was nobody else around, right?
Yeah.
So the closest neighbor was probably 2 miles away, 3 miles away.
Wow.
So, well, not neighbor with somebody my age.
So basically, you had brekkie in the morning, and then you went out, and then Mum and Dad didn't see you until it was dark.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of time on my own. So I got used to my own company, but I'm naturally an extrovert.
Yeah.
But I just lived in the woods basically.
Yeah.
So
I
was a little wild child.
You're lucky to be here, probably.
Yeah.
You're lucky to probably be sitting here. Mate, what sports did you play as a kid? I assume a bit different to what most of the people we have on here were playing.
Yeah.
So, cricket in the summer?
I bet you I'm the only one at this club that had this as a sport growing up. I was a wrestler from the age of 5 years old up until I graduated high school. That was my sport. That was my main sport.
Yeah, proper like Greco-Roman wrestling?
Yeah, I was a Greco-Roman. It was, we call it collegiate style, but it's like what you would see in the Olympics. So Greco-Roman is where you try to push them out, whereas this is all your takedowns, and then you get points and stuff.
I wouldn't take you for a wrestler. There you go.
But I can't. I think I stopped wrestling Darby when he was about.
So did you have the what do you call it? Was it like the
singlet?
The singlet.
Yeah.
But it was like a onesie, wasn't it?
It was a onesie, and one side was red and one side was blue, so it was like your home and away side.
I wish you had bought those pictures. Mate. Has Darby ever seen those pictures?
Yeah, because my parents had them up when
Yeah.
me and my wrestling stance, and I used to have the I can't show you, but you'd have the
You can
knee
show me, mate.
you'd have the knee pads on as well because you
Yeah.
you get like bad nap burn
Yeah.
when you'd wrestle, so you always have the knee pads on, and then the wrestling shoes, which were like really sort of thin white laced up kind of boots.
There you go. So we're gonna knock at the door. Hello? No, they're not coming in.
Okay.
How would you go wrestling Derby?
Well, when he actually started to get stronger, and then the thing is with wrestling is that, there's this point where if he can kind of hurt somebody, especially as they get stronger. So I kind of stopped wrestling him when he was about 12 because he was a pretty strong kid.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've probably wrestled since then. And if I wrestled him now, I wouldn't stand a chance.
I would like to see that, and I think a lot of people would like to see you.
No, that's not going to happen.
I think Darby would like to wrestle you. So wrestling, was there any American footy made, or was that at school or gridiron? Or
Nah, never really. I mean,
basketballer?
Yeah, my brother played, so like basketball was just everybody played basketball in America.
Yeah.
Like,
You're too busy shooting stuff, mate.
Yeah.
To be worrying about.
But in high school, like that was what you did on your breaks and stuff. You'd play basketball with your mates and stuff. I guess kind of like they do handball. We just play basketball, so it was very common. And in track and field, so in high school, actually junior high, my wrestling coach got me running long distance.
Yeah.
And I was actually I was better of a long distance runner than I probably ever was a wrestler. And then plus in high school, I learned there's girls on the track and field too. So that was good.
So you were a little player, were you?
Yeah.
Mate, who were your? I'll help you out. Who were your heroes growing up? Did you have any posters hanging up on the wall, mate? Any sporting stars?
I would say sporting stars. It was I grew up in an old part of America that was like lots of Civil War battles and presidents and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And my dad was kind of the local history buff, so
yeah.
It's really strange to say, but it'd be like presidents of America and stuff like that.
They were your heroes.
Yeah.
So you had Abraham Lincoln up on your wall and George Washington.
George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, guys like that. So and then being from the South, it was like especially from Virginia, which a lot of that early Constitution stuff came from there. So a lot of my heroes were just history. I was a history buff. Like,
were you
just like
involved
my
in
dad.
any of those reenactments?
No, I never did any of that stuff.
Never did that?
But like I grew up in Civil War battlefields, so I pulled out bayonets. I used to find musket balls and stuff like that. So I'd actually, one of the things I would do is just walk around and find artifacts on our property because it was a battle. It was a battle.
With what, you had like a metal detector, or you just walking around?
Walking around on a bank, and I pulled up. I thought I grabbed all a root, and pulled out a bayonet. But also there was
incredible.
In the place I lived before there was an Indian encampment behind our house, and so when they'd go and till the fields, and it would rain, you'd find arrowheads and like tomahawks, peace pipes. And all
being an archaeologist is a dream, mate.
I know. But I mean, it was all around there, right? Because it was, like you ever seen like Pocahontas and all that? Like that's where they originally, Americans originally went, and so there was an Indian nation that was there. So and one of the camps they had was right behind our house.
I love history. We talked all day about that stuff, mate. No, you wouldn't. So you obviously went to high school. Did you enjoy it, mate? High school? What was the high school you went to, by the way?
I went to Patrick Henry High School, and he was the guy that said, "Give me liberty, give me death." So, and that was towards the British to. It was like sort of like the declaration to, start the Revolutionary War. So, and he grew up where I was from. So
I'll pretend I know what you're talking about. Yes.
So it was Patrick Henry High School and Liberty Middle School. So it was all again, very much affiliated in that area with the history around there. And so I was like probably a B student, but I didn't really work very hard at all, right?
Yeah, because you're too busy chasing the girl.
Yeah, that's not for this thing. we don't talk about things like that.
What were you majoring in, mate? Were you?
Well, I went to go be a history major, but you know, like I look back on it now and like, what I don't know, what do you do with a history degree? Probably not much. So, yeah, it was kind of. I ended up dropping out of college and then going off to the Navy when I was about 19. So.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. Well, actually now.
Yeah, good transition.
Now, you're our very first sailor we've ever had on Gorilla Talk, so congratulations.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about life in the Navy for a young 19-year-old just starting out aboard the USS Ogden?
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah. So I went to school for 2 years in Chicago and doing my electronics. I was an electronics technician.
Yeah.
So I lived in Chicago for 2 years, and then I finally made it over to the USS Ogden, which was an amphibious ship, and we had about 500 Marines, and we carried Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recons, and the special boat units with us. So I got to work with a lot of doing the communications for the special forces. I mean, I wasn't special forces, but I actually used to be most of.
You can tell no one knows.
No, I wasn't. But I used to beat them in a lot of the long distance runs. So
yeah.
But they would I can't swim. I'm a terrible swimmer.
Yeah.
So
what was a typical day like for you? You wake up in the morning. You do 19-year-old. You're on the ship.
Yeah. So when you're out to sea, you do 12. You work 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
7 days a week.
Yeah.
For 3 months straight sometimes.
What's a typical day entail? You wake up 6 a.m. or maybe early.
Let's say the banter gets really good because you kind of get most of your work done within about 4 or 5 hours, and the rest of the time is just bantering back and forth, taking the piss out of each other, right? So it's kind of like being in a footy club in that way, you know. It's just the back and forth, you know, with your teammates. And you get very close to people, you know, because you spend so much time with them. You're living on top of each other, basically, because we'd sleep 3 on top of each other, and you eat with each other, you'd work with each other all day. And then, like my roommates in San Diego, when I lived in San Diego, I served on the ship with them, right? So we would basically then go, when we get off the ship, we'd go back to our apartment, we'd still be with each other. And we all had the same birthday as well.
Okay. So
that was kind of our thing. Somehow we just became really close, and I still stay in touch with them to this day. So.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And for you, I suppose, being in the Navy, the chance of you having to go and fight for your country, or was there any times where it?
Yeah, so I did 2 deployments out in the Middle East.
That must have been an incredible experience for.
I was a comms guy, right? So, look. The SEALs obviously did, and the Marines obviously did, but I was back on the ship. I mean, there was cases where
it's still a volatile situation.
I like there was one time where I had to stay up for it was about 3.5 days straight. I didn't sleep because of the situation that we were in, and you know it wasn't dangerous for me, but it was basically just having to make sure everything was done. But you start to
make sure everyone else is okay.
Yeah.
So you make mistakes, other people can potentially lose their lives.
Yeah.
So it's pretty serious.
Yeah, and it was to a point where I was actually getting delusional because if you stay up for that long, but caffeine's good. So I drink a lot of coffee. So.
Yeah. You strike me as someone that has a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
Mate, now, did the USS Ogden get lost? Is that how you made it down under, or was this a planned trip and move? Because that's a pretty big move to go to Australia.
So we were in the Gulf doing it's called visual board search and seizures of vehicles in the Persian Gulf, and then East Timor, if you remember that, kicked off. And so they pulled us out of there to go support the Australian Army with East Timor. Like putting our Navy SEALs into East Timor was like, I don't know, it was just such overkill. Like, because it was kind of more of a police action than it was really a military action. And So we didn't really do a whole lot around there. We weren't really needed. I think it was just more or less to keep us in the area in case the neighbor to the north wanted to get involved. It was just a way of America saying, stay out. And so we ended up spending a lot of time in Australia because of that. So we went to Cairns and came down to Brisbane. That's where I met my wife. So
Lovely. Where'd you meet your wife?
So we were just talking about this earlier. I met her at Hotel LA in Milton because I was staying at a hotel just not too far from there.
Did you have your Navy uniform on?
Nah, I was in my civilian clothes, but
Yep.
we were. I was with one of my buddies and we were playing pool, and her best friend were.
Sounds like a typical,
pool,
Top Gun movie sort of scene.
Yeah. And we weren't drinking, of course, it was November as well, so she just finished her exams. So she was celebrating her exams, and I'd just been out to sea for 3 months, so I was just celebrating not being out to sea. So and I had 3 months of hay on me, so it was just like, go out and have fun and have a blast for the time that I was here. So
And there you go. And 2 kids later, and we're talking on
yeah.
Now, tell me, how did lovable Yank,
Yeah.
it's okay to say Yank? I think it's okay.
Yank.
Yank like yourself get involved in a funny old game of Australian rules football?
So Darby and Gus McFadden went to prep together.
Yep.
And they were really good mates. And most people in the club would know who Gus is. They were really good mates in prep. And Gus invited Darby down to Auskick in prep. Said, like 4 or 5 year olds, getting him to go down. So, and if anybody's ever done Auskick, the parents are heavily involved in trying to kick. Now, I never really grew up playing a lot of ball sports, being a wrestler and stuff. And I never kicked a football ever in my life. Like, I kicked soccer balls and stuff like that, but never in my life kicked a football. So while he's learning how to kick, I'm learning how to kick. And I'm actually going back and watching videos trying to teach myself how to kick the football. And you've seen my kick. I don't think I ever really improved that much.
Look, I'm not a great kick, and a lot of people watching this will know that I'm not a great kick, but I reckon I've got you covered.
I think you've got me
just
covered.
quietly.
I think everybody in the under 8s has probably got me covered. So.
Well, I was fortunate enough to do the Auskick with you at the time. You were running the program there at Kedron. And you were incredibly passionate. When I got there straight away, I thought, wow, this guy, yes, he doesn't have a background in AFL, but he loves working with these kids and just trying to help them get better at this game that he has no idea about,
That's right.
which I found funny.
Yeah.
And sometimes you defer some things to me or other people about the football side of things. But in terms of being able to run this program with these kids and get them enjoying it and loving it, you were very, very good at that.
Yeah.
Which is why it leads into my next question, John. Now, you obviously found the passion for the game because in 2015, you were the Queensland Auskick Volunteer of the Year.
Yeah.
That's a pretty special award to win. And for someone who has no idea or knew nothing about the game prior, that's an incredible achievement.
Yeah, well, and I was proud of what we did at Kedron, is growing it from a fairly small program to, at the time we're promoting it, we're getting a lot of people in. We pretty much quadrupled the amount of Auskickers between that, like 2012 to 2015 age that I was running, or 2015 when I was running it. So, I was very proud of what we accomplished there. And I think even Kedron to this day, it's really helped to bring that club back to life with good junior numbers. And if you look at even over here and the impact it's had at WILSTON GRANGE is, there's been some really good players that have transitioned over to Kedron, over to WILSTON GRANGE, that are playing senior football for us and going off and playing in the VFL as well. And so, a lot of those kids were, Auskickers, and I still see them to this day, and I still see where they're going within their football. It makes me really proud, like, kids like Gus McFadden, James Milner, and Billy Richardson was one of them as well. So, and then obviously my own son, and the love and the passion we all developed the same love and passion for the game at the same time, because that's when I fell in love with AFL.
Yeah, yeah. Were you going to a lot of the games? Now, I know Darby just had a ball in his hand.
Yeah.
Every day.
I'd come home from work, we'd be kicking for an hour every day.
And he was a very, very good little player back then. I can remember he was kicking the ball 20, 30 metre drop punts, hitting targets at 5, 6 years old, which other kids just weren't able to do at that stage. I remember umpiring one game that Darby was involved in, and he took a mark about 2 metres out from goal directly in front. And the little smart ass thought, nah, that's too easy. So he runs to the boundary line and snaps it for a goal. And then he's just waving his hands up in the air, and I'm like, you cheeky little... Anyway, it was good on him. He was a good little player. It was against Tigers team, that's why I was frustrated. Now, you also pulled on the boot yourself and were playing Masters AFL for Kedron at the time. How did you go, and what sort of player was the great John Breeden like? Were you a dashing wingman or a power forward? John, how would you describe
yourself? Well, they started me off as forward pocket to learn the game. I wasn't in anybody's way, but I ended up in the back pocket as I played further and further. Although I couldn't really kick up because the wrestling background and the attack and tackling and all that, I was really good at that. And
you get in there.
Yeah, and I didn't mind getting in there. I actually, that was my favorite part of the whole game. But when I'd get the ball, I'd be looking to get rid of it as quickly as I could, basically, because I didn't trust my own kicking ability a lot of the time. So, but everybody knew that around me. But as far as being a defender and going into a pack to try to get the ball out or tackle somebody, never was scared of that bit.
Little antagonist.
Yeah.
Well, I know why you went down the back line, because for a period of time on the forward line, we were trying to get you a goal, right? Because you'd never kicked a goal in AFL football. Yeah. And for people who know me, I don't pass the ball.
Yeah.
Like Kevin Bartlett has handballed me myself. And I reckon there were 6 or 7 occasions where I'd give it to you 5 metres out, directly in front, miss. And I remember, I think it was the second last game or something, you'd taken the mark, same sort of thing, 5 metres out, and I said, John, you've got to kick this. This is the last chance you're getting. And you went back and slotted it. And I remember it was a pretty special moment.
Yeah.
Like you were absolutely chuffed. I don't know if there's any footage of that, but I certainly remember it, that's for sure.
No, and I find it hilarious that, because my son is such a good kick, and he always has been such a good kick, even from a young age, and I could never learn the mechanics of it. And it's just because by the time I actually started kicking, I was like 35.
Yeah.
And so I had 35 years of my life where I never had done it, and so I could never teach my body the mechanics of it. Whereas, him just growing up from a little kid, just always having a ball in his hand.
He always had a foot in his hand, and I think that's one of the things these days with a lot of kids is, they've got the video games and the social media and all that sort of stuff and other things going on. They don't tend to have the footy in their hands all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas back in our day, even though I wasn't that great, but my mates would always have the footy in their hands, and some of them sleep with the bloody footy, like they say, and they were, could control it and were incredible kicks and that sort of thing. And I'm not surprised. I'll move on to me because there's more questions, John.
Cool.
So when and why did you leave the Kedron Lions and make your way to the
that was a
mighty Gorillas?
Yeah, that was a tough decision. There was a couple factors. One was the culture there within the senior club I didn't really like, and I've been trying to change for years, and I didn't believe it would ever change. I think it has now, though. I still have a lot of
from a being involved in a junior perspective.
Yeah. And so that was one part of it. The other part was also because Darby would have been 9 or 10, and he's starting to play around the local comp, and I also realized he needed to go to a bigger club to help him develop more, and that he probably wasn't. He was going to reach his limits at Kedron. So. Not trying to get too far ahead of myself, and there was, a period of time where, especially in his mid-teens, where I didn't even think he would play football again. But up up until he was about 12, you know, he at his age group, he was the standout.
Yeah.
And so
making all the Met Norths and making all the squads.
And you know, best out of Met North, you know, made Met North as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, and then, you know, so it was evident that he needed a bigger, you know, a bigger club to go to.
With probably more people are giving maybe some more guidance, have more experience.
Yeah, and coaches that had played at more senior levels, that understood the game a little bit better. I mean, you know, I love the people at Kedron, and I still have to this day have a lot of good friends there. But he was never going to be able to get to a point and learn how to be a good team player at Kedron, because he was just going to, you know, probably end up developing bad habits of being selfish with the footy, you know, not being grounded enough. So whereas he comes to Wilston Grange and no longer is he the best player in that whole club, you know, there's other kids that are around him that have that same ability. Like
was that
and Archie and, you know, Bailey, he played with it, and they were really good players.
Incredible players. Was that hard for him at the time with that? Because he's going from playing at Kedron, where he's clearly the standout player. You know, it's daylight until there's sort of someone else. He comes to Wilston Grange, bigger club, a lot of other players. Do you think that had an impact on him?
So it you know, I remember the first day I brought him down, and he didn't really want to come, right?
Is that because it's a new environment,
Yeah.
fresh start, not used to it?
Yeah. But within a few weeks, he was, you know, good mates with everybody in the club, and made all new friends and stuff like that. So that moved on fairly quickly. But he was hesitant to leave. But looking back now, you know, he's Wilston Grange through and through. He might not have started here, but he came over when he was 9. All of his best mates, all of his best friends that he's made in this club, you know, and he has those connections with them, and even some of his friends that he had at Kedron made their way over here too as they started playing youth football, and so this club has always been a massive part of his growing up. So, and like, he loves this place. You know, this is his club. So.
Yeah. Now, with Derby playing, I remember being involved a little bit with him, helping out sort of with the second team, probably 3 years ago now. And I noticed with his football, he's still obviously a small forward. He'd always be kicking the goals.
Yeah.
Always be kicking the goals. Didn't really play anywhere else or want to.
Yeah.
It reminded me a little bit of myself when I was playing, in terms of the fact that I just wanted to kick the goals. And I know Derby loved kicking the goals. He probably wasn't that team-orientated player, but I remember watching him early this year, and I hadn't seen Derby for a couple of years because I'm involved in doing some other things, and I was out watching the game against Aspley, and he was, I think, maybe full back or back pocket, playing on Maxi Payne or on the middle. Anywhere where Payne went, Derby went, and Payne, for those that don't know, you know, we're talking 13 or 14, 15 maybe, best and fairest, champion in qualified competition, and here Derby is toweling him up down the back line, and it looked like he just completely changed the way he was playing. He looked like an incredible team player, completely blanketing this star of the game in Payne, and I thought, wow. He's senior quality. He's a senior footballer, and I think next week he was in.
He was. Yeah.
I remember speaking to Minnie after the game, saying, "Mate, I thought he was best on the ground by a mile." And yeah, Minnie said that he'd had a conversation with him, and I'm not going into the conversation, but the penny had dropped, and Derby started to really take footy probably a bit more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You can maybe explain it a bit better than myself.
Yeah, and there was he played every single year through his teenage years, but he preferred basketball over football, And so I would get him down eventually, and calling up Craig Thompson, going, "Do you got a spot for Derby?" And like the last day before he could register, and there was a couple of years like that. So he'd end up in the second team, and so he just put himself in forward pocket and just loved it, right? And it kept him in the game, and that was really good because it kept him playing every single year. Last year, though, he actually started getting a little bit more serious about his football. He played 17 Div 1, and I think he started also to realize, because he's good friends with a kid named Dan Annabelle and Harry Bridges. So if anybody follows the academy.
He started off though in the second team in 17s.
Not last year. He was straight into Div 1 side because he showed up and he did preseason for the first time ever. Well, not ever since he was about 14. So, but he and then like Hayden Hall going off, and he's good friends with Hayden. He made good friends with Dan and Harry in under 12s, and he started to see that those kids were going to probably, like, Dan's definitely going to get drafted, and Harry Bridges probably will get drafted next year. And I think he started to realize, that he's letting an opportunity pass him by. Because if he could have stayed on those same paths with those kids, he'd probably be at that space. So he's got the natural talent. It's always been what he wanted to go do. And I think this year he started to realize that he wants to take his football a lot more serious. And he's matured a lot over the last 12, 18 months.
Got that off Mum.
Yeah, totally. I still haven't matured, right? So.
No, look, he's an incredible footballer. He's always had the talent, no doubt about it.
It's always been what he wants to do, though.
But now, sort of the penny's dropped, and he's like, "Yep, I'm going to do it." Now, jumping away from Derby for a little bit. Now, like many of our great mums and dads at this footy club, you got involved straight away. Sort of when you came over to help out in any capacity. Can you tell us a little bit about all the different roles you've had at the footy club, mate? You always wearing that little orange bib.
Grand Marshal. Well, so if I'm not a manager or assistant coach, then especially when Derby's playing the second teams, because nobody would put their hands up, and so I just go, "Oh, just let me know what you want me to do." I don't think I could coach youth football, but I could be an assistant coach, right? Because I'm good with the kids and get to know them and encourage them and do one-on-one stuff. But I never played the game well enough to know the ins and outs of everything, right? So I never wanted to be, and never even thought about trying to be. But I'd be the assistant coach to help out, or I'd be the manager to help out.
So you always wanted to do something to help.
Yeah, it was basically, and it drives Kirsten crazy. But if somebody asks me to do something, or they need a hand with something, I always say yes, right? Like, and because when I was a Kedron and I was on the committee, I know how much hard work goes in by volunteers, and how much effort they're putting in. I always wanted to say I'll help out those people because I know how much they do for myself and the community, and so I didn't want to ever be that parent that doesn't. For me, it was always important to at least participate, to try to make those people's lives easier, so that they're not having to worry about, how are we going to coach this team, or who are we going to get to manage that team. And so as soon as somebody would ask, I'd just say yes, right? Sometimes I had conflicts though, because my daughter also, she plays basketball, and so I couldn't commit to every single week.
Yeah.
But I always committed to, like if I wasn't, I'd co-manage and do all the admins, because I've been doing that sort of stuff. So for me, all that
second nature for you.
Yeah, I've been doing it for 10 years now. So getting in and doing up teams and understanding ground marshal rules and what a manager needs to go do, that stuff's easy for me, because you just do it so many times. It's pretty much always the same at each game. So
yeah, is that something you see yourself maybe in the future being involved in, because you haven't been on the committee, the junior committee or the senior committee? Is that something where you see yourself, because they're always putting their wanting good people
Yeah.
that understand.
No, look, because I've done so, like I did 5 years on the committee at Kedron,
Yeah.
and I think everybody's got to, like, not everybody, but once you do, 5 years or so, like I think you've done your time, and so then your job is to make things easier for the current generation, and there needs to be a transition in the committees, because where I actually find a lot of clubs go wrong is that there isn't that transition through the committee, so you don't have the newer bloods coming in to start changing things and to evolve into the time. And so I think it's actually healthy for, it's not meant in 5 years, it could be a little bit longer, but there needs to be that transition. It needs to be the new people that come through. So, although, I mean, if we got into a situation where they needed people in there, and they had to have a registrar.
I just had to ask you, and you'd say yes, John.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
But at the same time, I actually don't think I would say yes to the committee because I've done that, and I think that we need to be searching for the next generation that comes through, because that's how the club continues to grow and continues to build and stay part of the community.
Well, I suppose the transition really comes when the junior people get into the senior space.
Yes.
Then that's how the transition comes,
Yeah.
because once your kids are playing in the senior space, you're more involved, you hear more, and that's where I think some of the junior people go, well, okay, I'm in this senior space now, I might want to see some change in this, that.
Yeah.
Well, then you get involved in the committee.
Yeah.
And that's where I think generally the change it'll inevitably happen.
Yeah. And look, possibly in the senior club, and if Derby continues to play, and my daughter does rep basketball, and I don't know how much you know about that, but that takes up a lot of time for about 6 months out of the year.
Well, it's your fault your kids are so good at sport.
Yeah, that's true. But that's pretty much like it's your.
Which, coming from your sporting background, mate.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Well, I couldn't find a wrestling club in Brisbane. So
right, yes.
I tried. There's not.
Do they have masters? They have masters wrestling?
Oh God, I'm not doing that.
I reckon a lot of people like to see you put on your.
Yeah. The last time I wrestled was, I think I was pretty drunk up at Noosa, and didn't end up.
Someone gave you a dare.
Yeah,
That's hilarious. Is there any chance, mate, that you might come out of retirement and pull on the boots and play Masters for the Gorillas here? Or because we don't, there's guys in this. Jim Butler's 63.
Yeah. And actually
young.
And actually, when I was 43 is when I stopped playing, right? Because when you're 43 and you're playing against 35-year-olds, it's actually a big difference.
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
That's right. And so, when I started getting rotated on forward pocket, I was like, this is a good sign, right?
Yeah.
So then is
that your way out, you reckon?
Yeah, that's like your wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yeah. There's nowhere else we can put you.
But I guess coming back in the over 45s, it slows down, and it's not as competitive.
Well, they have an over 50s.
Do they have an over
50s? Or 50s or 55s? They're looking at starting. I think they might only play 4 or 5 games a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something they're doing now.
Yeah.
So you never know. I just know how much you love the game, mate. Mate, finally, outside of footy and work, what does John do to relax or unwind? Is there any hobbies or interests, mate?
Well, kids take up a lot of my time following around sports, and that's probably.
Does your wife ever get to see you these days, or?
Well, the weekends we sort of pass through.
You say good day.
Well, because Darby now drives himself, we tend to go.
It makes it easy when they
Makes
do
it
license.
But outside of work and footy, I do work a lot, and what do I do to relax? I mean, go hang out with some of my mates, have a coffee or a beer locally.
What are you watching on Netflix at the moment? Is there a series?
What was I watching? It was 9/11. It was a thing. It was a documentary.
Documentary on 9/11.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I was in the Navy in 9/11, and I was actually in charge of a military. I was in.
That must have been incredible. Sorry, that must have been incredible well, it obviously was an incredible moment in time, but
Yeah, it's
especially
crazy.
being
Yeah.
American.
It's a crazy day for me. I was on shore duty. I was at a place called Spagor, which is a research and development facility for the U.S. Navy. So there's like 10,000 civilians, and there was about 100 military, right? And I was senior enlisted guy at the time, because I pretty much made rank every time. But I wasn't an officer, but my job was basically to go in and download the morning traffic, get the briefing ready for the commanding officer and the admiral, and then I'd present to them about 7 o'clock in the morning.
It's a pretty important job, John.
Yeah, it's just something you did like once a week, every 6 weeks, but that was my week. And so I had to be in at 5, and that was the September 11th. And so I think they hit about, and it was on the West Coast, so it was about 5:38 is when they hit. And so nobody was in. It was just had the security guards, and they were all civilian security guards. They weren't even military police. And so I'm doing, and I was kind of like I'm kind of in charge of the base. And I say kinda, it's like they just report. They give me a report, right, and then I prepare that. But and they come in, and they're like, "Oh, planes hit the Twin Towers," and I'm just like, "Oh, it was like like just a prop plane or whatever." And then eventually we get a TV and turn it on. And I was getting, and like, there's no message traffic, like, because I'm sitting in a secured area with all the messages. There's no message traffic coming in about that. And so the TV was the only way we could figure out what was going on. So then I had to go drive over to the captain's house and wake him up, and then shut down the base, basically. Well, I think I'd already shut down the base, or we were shutting down the base, because we didn't know what was going on at the time. And then I ended up staying up for about 2 days in that, because there's only 100 military in this base of like, where 10,000 people were.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any manpower. And even though I was senior enlisted, I was actually the most junior guy there. I was like a staff sergeant. Like I wasn't a like a private or anything. I was like, well, it was petty officer first class. It was like a staff sergeant. So I ended up having to take on all these military police duties, coordinating all the security guards, and
because of
9/11, and I was up for about 2 days. And I remember and I was trying to drive home. And I just went to my buddy's house, and we lived like 5 miles down the road, and I just crashed on the couch because I lived a little bit further out. There's no way I could have driven back home. So
surreal.
man.
Surreal time.
But I remember that that day was a major event for me in my life. So.
Oh, it's a major event for everyone. I didn't think the final question would go there, but I'm glad it didn't. Got to share your story. Mate, thank you so much for being on Gorilla Talk. I'm just grabbing some chocolates for you, mate.
There we go. This is the only reason I did it.
Yeah, I figured that. That's the only reason people do it. Thank you very much for your time, mate. Really appreciate everything you've done for the club. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
Cheers,
Robert.
mate. Ta.